Tom's wife Dawn was going to be out working all evening, visiting an important client in the city, so Tom decided to spend the evening at his hobby, something he had done occasionally during 5 years of marriage but about which Dawn knew nothing, a spot of cross-dressing. He started as soon as he got home from work, having a shower, shaving and waxing his legs. Dawn knew that Tom's legs were virtually hairless, but she had never suspected the reason. Next, Tom squeezed into a tight corset to give him a shapely feminine figure, pushing 2 breast forms down the front to acquire a bust. He arranged himself under a pair of red lacy knickers before he put on his favorite outfit, a short black mini dress, black tights and black stilettos. Then came a shoulder-length chestnut brown wig. He sat at Dawn's dressing table to put on his makeup, trying to make it feminine, subtle and sexy. He loved bright red lipsticks and black liner. Some stick-on cherry red false fingernails completed the effect. Finally, he found some jewelry in his secret hideaway and put on a pendant necklace and bracelets on each wrist. Tom stepped back and admired himself in his wife's long mirror. Very nice. He was proud of how he looked when dressed. Although he had never been out en femme, this was one of his cherished ambitions. He thought he might be able to pass. He admired his handiwork with the makeup. One of my better efforts, he thought. What would Dawn think if she saw me now? Tom was excited but determined to keep up the excitement all evening. He went downstairs and put the kettle on to make a cup of tea. It had been a long, tiring day at the office, and he would need a cup of tea to revive him before he started cooking his evening meal. Tom was now quite practiced at walking in his high heels, and he moved easily around the kitchen. As he waited for the kettle to boil, he didn't hear the sound of Dawn's car pulling onto the drive nor the sound of her key turning the lock of the front door. Her appointment had been cancelled at short notice by her client. Tom was just pouring the boiling water into the teapot when his wife opened the door into the kitchen. With Tom's back to her, Dawn saw the shapely image of a young woman making a pot of tea in her kitchen. Thoughts raced through her mind. You slapper. If you're having an affair with my husband, I'll bloody well kill you, she shouted. Tom's heart was beating quickly. He had always thought that he would have to tell Dawn about his hobby sometime, but now she had found out by accident. He gripped the kettle and tried to remain calm. Slowly he said in a soft voice, I am not having an affair with your husband because I am your husband. As he said the last word, he turned slowly to face his wife. Dawn let out a gasp when she saw it was really Tom in front of her, went white in the face and fainted. Tom rushed over to her in his stilettos. Caring little for dignity in his short dress, he bent down over her, picked her up and tottered into the lounge, carrying her before putting her down gently on the sofa. Dawn still had not come round, so Tom opened the drinks cabinet, found a bottle of brandy and a glass. No, I'd better make that 2 glasses. I will need a drink to get through this, he thought as he took a swig of his brandy. Have I got time to change before she comes round? A sigh from the prostrate Dawn told him the answer was no. She was already coming to. Here, drink some of this, he said, holding the other brandy glass gently to Dawn's lips. This will make you feel better. Dawn took a couple of sips and then opened her eyes. She hadn't been imagining things. There was Tom in front of her in a long brown wig and a black mini dress. Are very feeling okay? He asked. Much better, thank you. But I've got a few questions to ask. I think you've got some explaining to do. I think I'll just nip upstairs and change, said Tom, trying to seize the opportunity to get out of his strange clothes that had suddenly become uncomfortable. No. Stay with me. I still feel a little faint. Oh, shit, thought Tom. Now I'll have to stay looking like this. He was feeling very nervous. You're not going to kick me out, are you? He asked. That depends on how you answer the questions. Sit down. Tom sat down at the other end of the sofa, smoothing his dress over his backside as he did so. He had seen countless women do this and it looked very feminine, but it mainly served to dry Tom's clammy palms. Why do you do it? Are you gay? Oh no, nearly all cross-dressers are straight. Do you want a sex change or something? Not at all. I don't want to be a woman, I just want to dress as one occasionally. It gives me a thrill. A sexual thrill? Does it turn you on? Tom looked down to break eye contact. He looked at his manicured hands and his long thighs. This dress is really too short, he was thinking. He nodded shamefacedly. How often do you do it? Dawn asked. That depends on opportunity. I suppose once a week on average. Sometimes twice. Does it give you an orgasm? Tom nodded again without looking up. Do you ever go out like that? You're quite pretty, really. Tom blushed. Never. Do you? Do you ever wear my clothes? No. Not anymore. I used to when we just got married. I think I must have tried on every item in your wardrobe. Then I got worried that you might notice that I'd put something back in the wrong place and get suspicious. So I decided to get my own stuff. Anyway, your clothes are how can I put it, conservative for my tastes. I prefer something a bit more sexy. So I see. Where do you get them from? I can't imagine you going shopping in Next or River Island. No, I wouldn't dare. I get it all on mail order. I get it sent to the workshop so that you won't see the parcels and ask me what's in them. I get them sent to a Miss T. Henderson. Would you let me borrow some of your stuff? I don't see why not. They'd fit all right. You'd find the skirts a bit short though. Dawn smiled. It might be fun. Would you like to get me one of your skirts now, so I can try it on? Tom smiled. The ice seemed to be melting. Perhaps this wouldn't be so bad after all, he thought. Dawn didn't seem to be angry. Now she wanted to wear a short skirt. One of mine. His pulse rate had slowed to normal and his palms stopped sweating. I'll go upstairs and find something. Tom tottered out to the hall on his high heels and slipped up to the marital bedroom where he kept his garments in a secret compartment in his chest of drawers. He picked up the first skirt he found, a leather micro mini. No, he thought, it's too risque. He picked up the next skirt, a navy pleated mini skirt, longer than the leather skirt but not too long, held it up, smiled to himself and headed back downstairs. When he returned to the lounge, Dawn had taken off her calf-length skirt and was standing in her black stockings and suspenders. He handed her the skirt and she stepped into it, tugging it up around her waist and doing up the button and zip. She smoothed the skirt down. It just about covered her stocking tops. She went into the hall and admired herself in the long mirror there. When she returned to the lounge, Tom was again sitting on the sofa trying to appear nonchalant. Well, I've not worn anything this short since I was at school, Dawn commented. In fact, I used to wear a skirt just like this at school. A sudden thought entered her head. Tom, this isn't part of a St. Trinian's outfit, is it? Tom blushed again. Dawn understood exactly what this meant. It is, isn't it? Oh, you have been a naughty little girl, haven't you? Can I try the whole outfit on? Where is it? In our bedroom. Let's go upstairs and find it. Dawn headed for the stairs before Tom could do anything to stop her. Dawn swept up to the bedroom with Tom in pursuit. He had left the secret compartment of the chest of drawers open and knew that a curious Dawn would want to examine every item in there in detail. Is this where you keep your clothes? Asked Dawn. It was a rhetorical question. She already knew the answer was yes. Let's see what else you have. A white blouse, that's nice. A school tie and blazer. Blue ribbons for your hair. She pulled the clothes out and put them on the bed. She delved a little more. What's this black and white garment? It's got a lovely lacy frill. Oh, Tom, I do believe it's a French maid's outfit. She held it up to inspect it. Very short and provocative. You are a naughty girl. I bet you look nice in it. Well, don't you want to put it on and show me? Tom felt even more embarrassed. He wished he could disappear. He didn't seem to have a choice. He wished he'd never bought that maid's costume. It was a bit pervy and he didn't really like it. Why hadn't he thrown it away? He didn't think anyone would find out. Well, now Dawn had. If you want me to, Tom said quietly. He took the costume from his wife, put it down on the bed and slowly started to peel off his dress. Meanwhile, Dawn had removed her top and was putting on the white school blouse. As she was tying her tie, Tom was doing up the ties on the white apron. "Don't forget the stockings," said Dawn. Tom looked in the drawer and found his suspenders, stockings, and the lacy maid's white cap. He stepped out of his shoes, rolled down his tights, and then put on the suspenders and the stockings. As he pulled up the suspender belt, Dawn got a glimpse of Tom's red lacy French knickers. A French maid in French knickers. How appropriate, joked Dawn as she brushed her hair and tied it into 2 bunches with the blue ribbons. Tom stepped back into the stilettos and stood up straight to show his new outfit off to his wife. She whistled. "You look a real babe. If only Steve and Gareth could see you now." Steve and Gareth were Tom's best friends, and the 3 men enjoyed a few beers together in the pub every Saturday. "Perhaps the 4 of us could go for an evening out together. We could go for a meal. You'd have to wear a smart dress. Have you got one? You wouldn't dare tell Steve and Gareth, wouldn't I?" laughed Dawn. She was joking, wasn't she? thought Tom. He didn't like the idea of going out with Steve and Gareth at all. He had long suspected that Steve fancied Dawn. That would leave him paired off with Gareth. Which was worse? Being paired with Gareth or his wife being paired with Steve? "No, I wouldn't, but you look nice dressed like that," she admitted. Tom breathed an inner sigh of relief. "You look gorgeous in that uniform. Fancy a snog." "I've never snobbed a French maid before, but I'd like to try it. It's a long time since I snobbed a schoolgirl." The next 15 minutes were spent snogging and groping as they both lay on the bed, feeling each other's thighs and up each other's skirts. Dawn soon felt Tom's manhood getting bigger under his red lacy knickers. Before long they were lying next to each other in the aftermath of a powerful orgasm. "Wow," said Dawn, "I never suspected you were such a goer. Did you enjoy it? What do you think? Can we do it again sometime?" "Yes, but I can't call you Tom dressed like that. I'll call you Tammy." Tammy nodded. "How's my makeup?" "Just like a woman," thought Dawn. "She's worried about her makeup." "Not too bad considering," she said. Tammy was already looking in her compact mirror, inspecting the damage. The sex had ended any inhibitions she might have had about Dawn, who seemed to be pretty broad-minded about the whole thing. There had to be a catch. "Can I make you a proposition?" asked Dawn. "Of course," said Tammy, reapplying her lipstick. "Well, you know you finish work at 3 o'clock on a Friday and I don't finish much before 6. I'd like you to come home, get dressed in what you're wearing now, tidy the house, hoover the carpets, do the ironing and prepare the meal. After we've eaten, you can dress up as you please and we can have fun." "Do I have to do all that tidying, hoovering, ironing and cooking stuff? What's a maid for but doing the housework?" "What if I say no?" "You wouldn't." "Do you want me to tell Steve and Gareth?" "No. Not if you do as you're told. You mustn't dress like this on any other day though." "Okay? Okay." The following Friday Dawn arrived home to find Tammy in her maid's outfit, apron, stockings, stilettos, leaning over the ironing board pressing one of Dawn's blouses. The house was neat and tidy. The dusting had been done. A smell of cooking wafted in from the kitchen. "Good evening, Tammy, what time are we eating?" asked Dawn. "Good evening, ma'am." "At 6:30, ma'am, just as you requested." Tammy curtsied to her mistress. "Oh, Tammy, I've brought you a present." Dawn handed Tammy a shopping bag. Tammy took the bag and opened it to find a pink mini dress. "Oh, thank you, ma'am. Can I wear it later? I will like wearing it." Tom goes out every Friday. Dawn's maid Tammy helped with the housework. She let herself in, carefully changed into her working clothes before setting to work. First she hoovered, then she dusted, then she did the ironing. Finally she prepared the meal for when Dawn got home. This would have been a great help to Dawn and her husband Tom, who both worked full-time, except for the fact that Tammy and Tom were the same person. 3 months ago Dawn had come home early and caught Tom in a black mini dress. She had blackmailed him into doing more than his fair share of the housework. After dinner, Tammy cleared away and did the washing up while Dawn went upstairs and changed out of her working clothes. Dawn came down wearing a rather risque new miniskirt made from black PVC and into which she had changed. "You can go and get changed now, Tammy, while I make the coffee," she said. Tammy curtsied to her mistress. "Thank you, ma'am." As Dawn made the coffee, Tammy slipped upstairs to her bedroom to change out of her working clothes and into something more comfortable. This was the time Tammy looked forward to every week. She had enjoyed these Friday night sessions with Dawn for the past 3 months and now felt completely comfortable when dressed in Dawn's company. Dawn seemed to accept the strange hobby completely and had taught Tammy how to do her makeup most subtly and how to put her hair in a bun. The two women shared each other's cosmetics and perfumes freely. They had even been out shopping a few times to extend Tammy's wardrobe, even though Tammy had to go as Tom and so couldn't try the clothes on in the shops. Dawn often borrowed Tammy's outfits like the PVC miniskirt. She had resolved to start to wear them to work but hadn't quite plucked up the courage yet. On this particular Friday, Tammy put on a new outfit that she had bought with Dawn, a stretchy white top and a little denim miniskirt. She looked at herself in the mirror. The skirt was too short for stockings, so she found some flesh-colored tights and put them on, followed by a pair of brown high-heeled ankle boots. Before Tammy had come out, she had one pierced ear. Now she had two, and she carefully fitted a pair of long dangly earrings. Then she put on a necklace, a bracelet, and 3 rings. She checked her makeup and hair. Tammy had one last look at herself in the mirror before going downstairs. She was always amazed to find how easy it was to change from an ordinary insignificant man into a pretty, drop-dead gorgeous babe. She had legs to die for and loved showing them off. She had bought one long skirt but hadn't worn it yet, preferring sexy tight minis that rode up as she sat down or short flirty A-line skirts that flounced as she walked, occasionally revealing a flash of petticoat lace or a suspender. She loved Fridays. Of course, wearing the maid's costume, doing the housework, curtsying and calling Dawn ma'am was humiliating but a small price to pay if she could dress like this every week. Dawn had even promised Tammy that one day she could stay en femme all day while Dawn dressed as the maid. Downstairs she received Dawn's compliments. "Very nice. The skirt fits perfectly," said Dawn admiringly as Tammy did a twirl. Tammy took her cup of coffee and sat down, revealing lots of thigh as she did so. "Do you fancy going out for a drive?" asked Dawn. It was May and daylight till around 9:30. Tammy suddenly felt nervous. She had never been out en femme but wanted to. "Will I have to get out of the car?" "No, what if we break down? You can take some of Tom's clothes in the boot if you like." "You're sure I won't have to get out of the car?" "Certain. The neighbors might notice and know it's me." "It's not very likely that they'll recognize you. It's more likely that they'll wonder what I'm doing wearing a PVC miniskirt." Tammy thought for a moment. She wasn't the only one taking a risk. "Okay," she said. "You're on." For the next few weeks, Dawn and Tammy went for a drive every Friday night without any alarms or arousing any suspicions. Each Friday they drove past a country pub, the Plough, about 10 miles from home. One night Dawn said, "I've always wanted to go into that pub. It looks so nice and friendly." "Some other time, love." "Why not? No one knows us here. No one will suspect anything. Leave the talking to me. I'll order the drinks and we can find a quiet table to sit and chat." "No," Tammy looked horrified. "Where's your sense of adventure? You said that you wanted to go out dressed. But look what we're wearing. It'll draw attention to ourselves." It was true that the sight of 2 young women going into a pub in very short skirts was bound to be noticed. "They'll probably think we're on the game dressed like this. Can't we come back next week wearing something else?" "Okay," said Dawn. "We'll come back next week." The following week they dressed more conservatively for their trip to the pub. Dawn wore some tight jeans. Tammy, who didn't like trousers, wore a long skirt of Dawn's. Her heart was pumping as they went in through the pub door. The only customers were 6 men standing near the bar. 6 heads turned as the 2 went in. A dozen eyes looked the strangers up and down admiringly. Tammy avoided any eye contact. Dawn, on the other hand, smiled at the regulars and said to her friend, "I'll get them in. You go and sit over there." She pointed to a table away from the bar. "A Diet Coke and a vodka and tonic, please," she called to the barman. Tammy sat down as she was told. "Make the vodka a double," Dawn added quietly when Tammy was out of earshot. Dawn carried the drinks over to the table, handed Tammy the vodka and sat down. "See, that wasn't too bad, was it?" asked Dawn as Tammy took a gulp of her drink. The men at the bar were no longer paying any attention to the two strangers and had continued their conversation. "You're joking, aren't you? To come in here and be leered at by those men, looking at your tits, looking at your legs, it made me feel like a piece of meat. Don't be so sensitive. You've done it yourself, you know. Now the boot's on the other foot. You'll soon get used to it." "Get used to it? I don't want to get used to them undressing me with their eyes. They'd get a bit of a shock if they could. Look, Tammy, you've made your bed, now you've got to lie on it. It wasn't my idea when you wore that little dress. You suggested coming here today. You know what they say, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen." "I suppose so," replied Tammy before having another gulp. The rest of the time in the pub passed uneventfully. More customers arrived, and as the room filled up, the two girls receded into the background. They had another drink and Tammy was slightly less steady on her high heels as they walked back to the car. "We must come again," said Dawn. Tom's new friend. Every Friday evening, Dawn and Tammy got dressed up in their finest clothes and drove to a quiet country pub about 10 miles from their hometown. There they had a few drinks quietly on their own, before heading back home. As the weeks went by, they became regulars at the pub and stayed a little later. They also became a little more daring with their clothing. When they first went, they had both been conservatively dressed, but now they tended to wear their favorite outfits, short skirts and high heels. They never got involved in conversations with the other pubgoers, particularly Tammy, who was really Dawn's cross-dressing husband Tom. Tammy had been practicing her female voice at home but wasn't sufficiently proficient or confident to use it in public yet, so Dawn always went to the bar to buy the drinks. Once or twice in the pub, they had been approached by a couple of blokes on the pole, but Dawn had firmly refused their advances, explaining they were both happily married and on a girls' night out. They were happily married too. Both of them enjoyed these Friday excursions for different reasons, and they always ended in great sex. Dawn often allowing Tammy to spend Friday nights sleeping in one of her lacy nighties. Tammy had grown more confident about visiting the plow. At first she had been just a bag of nerves, but now she realized that she could pass easily. No one in the pub seemed to suspect anything. One Friday, Tammy was wearing her favorite black mini dress, the one she had been wearing when Dawn had first caught her en femme. Dawn was wearing a delightful denim miniskirt that actually belonged to Tammy. They were sitting in their usual seats in the pub, Tammy drinking vodka and tonic and Dawn, who did the driving, drinking a Diet Coke when Tammy nudged Dawn in the ribs. "Have you seen who's over there?" she asked. Dawn looked across at the bar. Standing together, each with a pint in their hand, were Steve and Gareth, Tom's two best friends who he normally went drinking with on Saturday nights. Tom certainly didn't want to drink with them tonight. "What are they doing here? Let's hope they don't see us," said Dawn, turning away from them. "They won't recognize you, but they'll know me all right." "Of course they will," thought Tammy. She'd always suspected Steve of fancying Dawn, and once he'd spotted her in that sexy outfit he wouldn't be able to take his eyes and hands off her. "Can't we just slip out without them seeing?" Tammy suggested. "They're bound to spot me. Look, let's just sit tight for a few minutes. Then you slip out first to the car. I'll give you 5 minutes. If they spot me, at least they won't see you. Just keep calm." Calm? Did she say calm? Thought Tammy. Her hands were shaking. Her stomach was in knots. She tried not to look at the two men in case she attracted their attention, but she watched out of the corner of her eye. "Oh no," she thought, "they're coming over." Steve had noticed Dawn. He smiled at them as he approached the table. "Oh shit," thought Tammy. "What are they doing here? Did Dawn tell them we came to this pub?" "Hi, Dawn, fancy seeing you here," said Steve. "Do you mind if we join you?" He sat down next to Dawn without waiting for an answer and put his glass down on the table. Who's your friend? Oh, sorry, said Dawn. Steve, Gareth, this is my friend Tammy Cross. Tammy, these are my husband Tom's friends, Steve and Gareth. Hi, said Steve. Hi, pleased to meet you, said Gareth as he sat down next to Tammy. Tammy mouthed a hi to them both and smiled. She could hardly make a sound even if she'd wanted to. Her heart was pumping, her hands sweating and her throat dry. Where's Tom? Asked Steve, looking round. Is he here? No, he's at home doing a spot of decorating. Dawn had her excuse ready. Really? I tried to phone him about half an hour ago to see if he wanted to come out with us tonight, but there was no reply. He paused. You don't think he's out with another woman? Steve edged nearer Dawn on his seat. Tammy was getting angry. That's your game, is it? Suggest that Tom is unfaithful so he can get a chance with my wife. If I wasn't a woman, I'd stand up and hit you. Do you come here often? Gareth asked Tammy. How corny, thought Tammy. I've never been here before, she lied in her best attempt at a feminine voice. Gareth made a comment about the pub being friendly. Then he started on his life story. I'm a civil engineer with a company called. Tammy wasn't listening. She knew all about Gareth anyway. She was concentrating on what Steve was saying to Dawn while looking at Gareth. It sounded like that's a lovely skirt you're wearing. Steve was putting his hand on Dawn's knee. Dawn carefully lifted his hand off her leg, but he put it back again. Gareth was carrying on with his life story. Tammy had hardly heard a word he said but nodded to give the impression of being interested. Fancy another drink? Gareth asked. He went to bar and returned with another vodka, a Diet Coke and 2 more pints. He sat down closer to Tammy. Steve and Dawn were chatting away, flirting with each other. Tammy was trying to stay cool, but it was difficult. Tell me something about yourself, said Gareth to Tammy. Huh? Tammy hadn't been listening. She was still concentrating on what Dawn and Steve were saying. I said tell me something about yourself. I'm a housewife, 2 kids, both boys, 1 and 3. I don't get out much, said Tammy. It was her second lie. She was trying to do her best to put Gareth off. Gareth showed no signs of being put off that easily. He reached out and held Tammy's hand. Why don't we forego to see a late-night film, he suggested. Tammy was horrified. A man was holding her hand. Although she was flattered by the attention, it was not what she was expecting. Then he let go of her hand and put it on her thigh. I can't take any more of this, thought Tammy. Thank you, but my husband will be expecting me back at 10 o'clock, Tammy said, trying to be polite in her refusal. Her third lie. I don't want to turn into a pumpkin. Some other time then, maybe? Gareth suggested. He was stroking her leg under the table. Maybe, Tammy replied hesitantly. She looked at Dawn. Steve had his hand round her shoulders and was still flirting with her. I've got to put a stop to this, Tammy thought. It was nearly time to go anyway. She stood up. Excuse me a moment, I must powder my nose. She picked up her handbag and headed for the ladies. She didn't really need to visit the loo. Nor did she want to leave Dawn with Steve. By the time she got back they might be snogging. Tammy entered the ladies, taking special care to check that she didn't go in the gents. She checked her makeup and hair. It couldn't have been too bad or she wouldn't have had all that attention from Gareth. Had Dawn told them? Did they know who Tammy really was? Or was meeting them an enormous coincidence? There must be 1,000 other pubs they could have gone to. Tammy touched up her lipstick, not because it needed touching up but because it passed the time. She waited a moment, taking deep breaths to calm herself, ready to continue the ordeal. The loo door opened and Dawn came in. Are you okay? She asked. Tammy nodded. You seem to be getting on okay with Gareth. This was no consolation to Tammy. Do you think he's worked out who I am? Not a clue. He fancies you though. He just asked me for your phone number. I don't suppose he fancies me as much as Steve fancies you. His tongue was practically hanging out. And you're leading him on. Sorry, but it's quite fun. What did you say about the phone number? I said you weren't on the phone. Thanks. Love. Yes. Can we go home now? Yes. We leave the loo together in a couple of minutes. We'll go over to them, we won't sit down. I'll do the talking, say our goodbyes and say we've got to get you home to hubby. Okay? This went according to script and a few minutes later they were sitting in the car. Tammy breathed a huge sigh of relief. Let's not go here again, she said. Why not? You did brilliantly in there to carry it off. Remember what I said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Anyway, we're not going there next Friday because I've arranged something else. Oh. What? Going to the cinema with Steve and Gareth. Oh no, Tom's evening out when Dawn had first caught her husband Tom in a chestnut brown wig, black mini dress, tights and stilettos. She had suggested that they spend one evening every week with him dressed as Tammy. She knew that if she tried to stop him cross-dressing, he would just do it in secret anyway. She wasn't sure if she liked his hobby, but this way had a number of advantages because she was in control. Firstly, she could control when he dressed and what he wore. Secondly, Tom was happy to let her borrow his clothes and cosmetics. She now had the choice of 2 wardrobes. Thirdly, in exchange for allowing him to pursue his hobby, he had to spend 3 hours doing the housework. Fourthly, Tom's hobby didn't half turn him on. This turned Dawn on too, and their Friday night sex was particularly enjoyable. The short skirts they both wore gave them plenty of opportunity to rub their thighs together, something she found really sexy. The other reason that Dawn was in control was blackmail. Tom knew that if he stepped out of line, Dawn would tell his friends Steve and Gareth of his unusual hobby. Dawn knew this threat would keep her sissy of a husband in order. Tom had promised only to follow his hobby on Fridays, but recently he had grown more confident and he had asked if he could extend his activities. Dawn didn't know what to do. She had tried aversion therapy. Firstly, she had forced Tom to dress in a humiliating maid's costume. Then she had forced him to go out with her in the car en femme. Next, she forced him to wear a frock to a pub with her every week. Finally, she had arranged to bump into Tom's friends, Steve and Gareth, in the pub. Each stage had failed to put him off. In fact, he had passed every time with flying colors. Now she had arranged a double date for the 2 of them for next week. Worse for Tom, the date was with Steve and Gareth. Would this put him off? The date had been fixed one Friday. The following night Tom went for his weekly drink with his 2 mates. Where were you last night? Asked Steve. I had a spot of decorating to do, so I let Dawn go out with her friend Tammy. We know, said Gareth. We bumped into them both in the plow, over at Caterborn. Really? Dawn didn't say anything. Tell us about Tammy. Gareth was really smitten with her. They're going out together next Friday, said Steve. Tom noticed that he hadn't said anything about himself and Dawn being there as well. Did she tell you that she was married? With 2 kids? Her husband's a martial arts expert, so I'd be careful if I were you. Tom was trying hard to put Gareth off. Gareth just smiled. There's nothing in it. We're just going to the cinema together. Oh. What's she like anyway? I've never met her. Tammy? She's quite quiet. I think she must have been a bit nervous about what her husband might say if he found out she was in a pub, talking to a bloke while wearing a really sexy mini dress. Very pretty, nice hair, nice figure, gorgeous legs, nice personality. You were smitten, replied Tom, hardly realizing that the person Gareth was describing was himself. Nothing more was said that evening, but as the week passed Tom was getting more nervous. How could he chicken out of the date, or did he have to go through with it? He didn't like the thought of going out with a man, but he liked the attention he got. It was obvious too that Gareth hadn't a clue about who Tammy really was. Tom and Dawn usually played tennis in their local park on Monday evenings in the summer. They usually left home about 7 and played for an hour. About 6, Dawn said to Tom, I've bought you some new tennis gear. It's on the bed, if you want to go and get changed. Tom knew exactly what she meant. On the bed he found a white tennis dress, a white cardigan, some plain white socks, a sports bra and a pair of white frilly knickers. Tom smiled to himself as he saw the outfit. He quickly shaved, stripped out of his male clothing and put on the new outfit, including padding his breasts. A dab of makeup and his wig and the change was complete. He loved it. Dawn admired the new outfit and they both enjoyed the tennis. Dawn had decided to let Tom extend his feminine activities. She would look for more opportunities. As Friday approached, Tom grew more and more apprehensive about the date. The idea of him and his wife having a double date with two randy men was not attractive at all. He suggested to Dawn that she phone and cancel, saying that one of them was ill. Dawn refused. "I'll phone then," said Tom. "I'll say you've got flu." "No, you won't. I'm looking forward to Friday. I'll phone as Tammy and say I've got something else on." "Look, Tom, it wasn't my idea that you wear dresses. You started it, so you've got to finish it. If you chicken out, I'll ring Steve and Gareth and tell them both the real reason why Tammy won't go." "You wouldn't." "I would." "Okay," said Tom resignedly. "What shall I wear?" "Whatever you want." "But if I wear a short skirt, will he take it as a come on? If I wear a long skirt, will he take it as a brush off? Why is it so difficult being a girl? You've got to sort your own problems out. Only you will know what you're comfortable in." "What will you be wearing?" "I don't know yet." Dawn smiled. "I can guess. You'll be wearing my shortest skirt." "What's wrong with that?" "Because you're my wife and you're going to spend the evening with a randy bloke with wandering hand trouble who fancies you rotten. A girl has to look her best." "I'll tell you what. I'll finish work early on Friday and we can go shopping together." "You mean Tammy and you?" "Yes." Friday came. Tom still wanted to cry off, but the blackmail and the chance to go shopping en femme for the first time persuaded him not to. Dawn let Tom off with the housework so that they could visit the mall. When Dawn got home at 3:30, Tammy was ready to go to town. She was wearing her sexiest short black miniskirt, a tight white blouse, sheer tights and black stilettos. Her hair looked stunning, her makeup rather tardy with bright red lips and lots of black stuff around the eyes. Tammy had style. "Wow," said Dawn, "you look great, girl. Sex on legs. A girl has to look her best. Do you fancy going upstairs and doing it now? Is there time? If we're quick. It'll spoil my makeup." So the evening began as it normally ended. This increased Tammy's confidence for shopping in the evening with Steve and Gareth. The two girls spent an hour or so in the shops. Tammy didn't actually buy anything but just loved trying things on. In the end, she decided to wear what she had on, even it might have seemed to come on. "I must go shopping again," she thought. The four of them met up outside the cinema. The men were obviously impressed with the effort the girls had made to look their best. "Where's Tom?" asked Steve. "Doing the decorating?" "Yes, but let's not talk about him," replied Dawn, giving Steve a kiss on the cheek. "Hi. You look great," said Gareth to Tammy. He kissed her on the cheek. Tammy inwardly winced at the two kisses but outwardly smiled at Gareth. Gareth bought the tickets and they went inside and found 4 seats in the back row. Gareth sat next to Tammy while Steve sat next to Dawn. The show started and soon Steve and Dawn had their arms around each other and were not watching the screen. Gareth held Tammy's hand. Although she was slightly repulsed, she liked the feel of Gareth's warm hand. It was very reassuring and the attention was very flattering. Tammy noticed that Steve was feeling Dawn's thigh. Soon Gareth was stroking Tammy's thigh and she could feel a bit of a bulge in her knickers. "I hope it doesn't show," she thought, but as it was dark in the cinema she needn't have worried. Gareth's stroking moved up Tammy's thigh. "Not too close," Tammy thought, "or I'll have to put a stop to it." Steve and Dawn were locked in an embrace when Gareth moved close to Tammy and started embracing too. Tammy hated it at first, but as it went on, she shut her eyes and imagined that she was cuddling Dawn. It wasn't too difficult. She could smell Dawn's perfume from 2 seats away. The kissing and thigh-stroking lasted for the rest of the film but never went beyond that. After the show the men invited the girls for a drink, but Tammy had her ready-made excuse. "I must get back to the husband and kids," she said. Tom will be wondering about me too, said Dawn. They kissed goodbye and agreed to go out again soon. Tammy and Dawn headed back to the car park. When they were safely in the car, Dawn said, kissing a man like that. Now you really are a girl, you little tart. Now let's go home and do it again. Tom branches out. Tom's wife Dawn was quite impressed. Every little task she set her cross-dresser husband he accomplished with flying colors. First she humiliated him by forcing him to do the housework dressed as a French maid in an apron, high heels, stockings and a skimpy dress. Then the couple started going to a country pub with them both wearing the shortest of miniskirts. Next she fixed it so that they would bump into two of Tom's unattached male friends there. Finally the four of them went on a double date to the cinema together. She'd even taken him shopping and he'd loved it as they visited every women's clothes shop in the mall. But as Dawn said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Tom seemed positively to bloom in the heat. Not once did anyone suspect that he was not Dawn's friend Tammy. Not once did Tom waver in the enthusiasm and realism with which he played the role that Dawn had set him, even when he had to snog with his friend Gareth in the cinema. Now Dawn was to set him his final test. Tom's birthday was coming up soon on a Friday in August. He would be 30. Dawn had promised that he could spend the whole day en femme, something that he had never done before, so he had arranged the day off from work. Dawn was also arranging a few surprises for him. When Tammy woke up on her birthday, he realized that Dawn was not lying beside her. She turned over and caught a glimpse of something unusual out of the corner of her eye. She rubbed her eyes and sat up in her best frilly nightie. Dawn was standing by the bed, wearing Tammy's French-maid costume, apron, high heels, stockings, skimpy dress, the lot. "Good morning, madam." She curtsied, revealing a flash of lacy petticoat and stocking top. "Happy birthday." She held out a silver salver on which was an envelope and a present which looked like it might be a small book. Tammy smiled. "Good morning, Dawn." "Thank you." She took the present and started to remove the wrapping paper. Inside she found a maroon British passport. On it was written the name Miss TV Cross. Tammy opened the passport. She looked at the photograph. It was her. She looked at the details. Name, Tammy Victoria Cross. Sex, female. The date of birth was the same as Tammy's except that it had been moved back 5 years. Today was her 25th birthday. Dawn. "Where did you get this from?" "I can't tell you, ma'am, but it helps to have contacts. It looks very realistic. If it's a forgery, it's a very good one. Even experts can't tell them apart. And you'll need it this weekend." "Need it? The passport? Why?" "I suggest you look in the envelope, ma'am." Tammy grabbed the envelope and started to open it. Inside she found 2 airline tickets, returned to Paris in the names of Miss T. Cross and Mrs. D. Henderson. "Paris? For the weekend?" "Yes, ma'am. We fly out this morning and get back Sunday night. We're staying in a posh hotel near the Champs-Élysées. And the good news is that you can spend the whole weekend in something like this." Dawn passed Tammy another small parcel which she hurriedly opened and pulled out a full-length lacy ivory-colored silk petticoat. Tammy just loved petticoats. She loved the feel of the lace and the swish against her legs as she walked. "I can wear this all weekend," thought Tammy. She swooned. This was heaven. "Now may I suggest you start to get up, ma'am," ventured Dawn. "We don't have a lot of time and you need to get ready. After breakfast I'll help you pack." "Dawn, can you run my bath for me?" "Certainly, ma'am." "And put the kettle on for a cup of black coffee?" "Certainly, ma'am." Tammy liked having a maid. As Tammy lay in the bath her thoughts turned to the weekend ahead. Paris, how romantic. En femme. I needn't take a stitch of male clothing. Where did Dawn get that passport? Who cares? And where did she get that photo of me? Tammy had been very careful not to photograph. She knew that a photo in the wrong hands spelt trouble. Dawn had already packed her suitcase, of course. She also had hidden Tom's real passport in her handbag just in case something went wrong. She didn't tell Tammy, of course. She expected her to stay en femme all weekend. After breakfast made by the maid, Dawn and Tammy went upstairs to pack. Tammy was wearing her new petticoat underneath a pastel peach suit that made her look like a businesswoman. As you would expect if you knew Tammy, the skirt was quite short, but not that short, perhaps 3 or 4 inches above the knee. This meant she could get away with wearing stockings. With her platform shoes, her carefully styled hair and her attractive but discreet makeup, she looked very attractive. They packed corsets, cosmetics, dresses, lingerie, everything a girl needs for a weekend away. Dawn was very careful when folding Tammy's favorite black mini dress, the one she'd worn when Dawn had first caught her en femme. She also packed a black bikini and a toweling beach robe. Tammy looked at her questioningly, but Dawn explained that there was a swimming pool at the hotel. Dawn just had time to change out of the maid costume and into something only slightly more practical before a toot from a hooter told them the taxi had arrived to take them to the airport. The girls picked up their handbags and suitcases, checked they had their passports and tickets, then they were off on their adventure. As the girls went through passport control, Tammy was slightly nervous. Her hands felt clammy. Supposing someone spotted the fake passport? She was hardly worried at all about passing in public as she had been outdressed so often. She needn't have worried. The passport officer barely glanced at the passport and she was soon sitting in the departure lounge with Dawn wondering how to pass the next half hour until they would be called to their plane. "Do you fancy coming to the loo with me?" Tammy asked Dawn. "For you know?" "Yes, okay." One advantage of Tammy's hobby was they could visit the ladies together and both squeeze into a cubicle. Here Tammy sat down and Dawn sat astride her. It was easy when they were both wearing stockings. 10 minutes of fun and they were both getting their breath back. The girls sat next to each other on the plane. Dawn had been wondering who she liked better, Tammy or Tom. Tom had been a fine husband, faithful and reliable, but Dawn was beginning to find him a bit dull. Perhaps he was too ordinary. Tammy, on the other hand, was the sort of person who stood out from the crowd. Dynamic, exciting, good company, good fun and good in bed. She took a lot of pride in her appearance, unlike Tom. Tom was okay, but with a bit of makeup Tammy was a stunner. Dawn found Tammy a challenge. She didn't want to be left in her shadow, so she too took a lot of pride in her appearance. A lot more pride than when she went out with Tom. It made her feel good knowing that the two of them could turn men's heads wherever they went. Tammy was always looking for new things to do, new challenges. Tom was stuck in a rut. Dawn had come to realize that she liked being with Tammy more than she liked being with Tom. This was the purpose of the weekend away, for Tammy to find out if she would like being with Tammy full-time and if Tammy could be Tammy full-time. Tammy was thinking similar thoughts too. The whole weekend in petticoats. It was a good job she didn't get 5 o'clock shadow, as this would have caused a problem by now. She had never dressed like this for more than a few hours before. It was fun being Tammy for an evening, but full-time? How long would it be before she got tired of the effort to make herself beautiful? Before her stockings got uncomfortable and she wished she was back in jeans? Before her hair looked a mess? Before she grew tired of men staring, wolf whistling and even worse, sexually harassing her? She looked at her hands. They looked very feminine in their false nails. She looked at her legs. She liked wearing flesh-colored stockings best, although she thought they made her knees look knobbly. Her caught a flash of the lace of her new petticoat and smiled. She'd always loved a flash of lace. She liked what she was wearing. She had grown accustomed to the corsets and the wig. She was proud of her pretty, feminine appearance, which made men weak at the knees. This weekend would be fun. On arrival at the hotel, Dawn checked in and they were shown to their room. It was lovely. That afternoon the two girls went shopping. Tammy felt completely uninhibited and enjoyed herself completely. They had dinner in a quiet restaurant and then went back to the hotel for drinks in the bar. At least Steve and Gareth won't turn up here, Tammy thought. The following day the girls went sightseeing before spending the evening in the hotel. There was a disco in the hotel and they decided to go. They both got dressed in little short dresses with spaghetti straps and slipped down to the disco clutching their little handbags. Despite the attention of many men in the disco, the two danced on their own all evening, exciting a little comment when they smooched to a slow number. But who cared? This is better than an evening in the pub with your mates, isn't it? The following morning, Dawn popped the question. Tammy, would you like to live like this all the time? A frown appeared on Tammy's face as if to ask, how? Charlotte, Dawn's boss, has announced that she wants to open a new office in Caterborn. She has asked me to manage it. I will need an assistant. You could do the job. What do you say? We could move there if you want. Oh. Yes please, Dawn, yes please.